welcome to home, where faith and family meets. My name is Father Tim Donovan. I'm the parochial vicar here at St. Bonaventure Parish in Huntington Beach, and my co-host Pam Hurwitz is not able to be here today. She's doing some family ministry in South County today. We have some wonderful guests with us today, the Wissel family. We have Frank and Maggie, awesome parishioners here at St. Bonaventure, and so we welcome you to home.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just invite you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your family and maybe what you love doing together. And yeah.
I'm Maggie. We're going to sit here and look at each other.
Oh, that's nice. I wish we had a video, It'd be nice.
And let's see, we've been in the parish for about 35 years and been involved in a lot of different ministries. And this has been a unique experience working with Father Tim through the different podcasts. And so this is definitely a different experience.
That's right. They were on our Rebuilt and Renewed podcast, both of them, in different reflection pieces. Did you ever do a reflection together on that?
No.
Okay, each other, yeah. That was a good one, too. I got a lot out of those. I tell people selfishly I do the podcast so that I can actually have good ideas for my homilies for the next week. But it's good. It's an opportunity too. I love it.
Whatever works.
I love doing it. Awesome. We just got done with the funeral too, right?
Yeah.
The funeral ministry.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting ministry, right?
Yeah, I've been in there for about a year.
Nice.
And helped coordinate it now. And it's a surprising blessing. It sounds strange that what joy a funeral can bring. It's a time that I feel like extreme closeness to God, and things that I would have never expected, fruits, as they say, from this ministry. So it's been good. It's been a challenge, but it's been good.
Nice. They're saying in wisdom that certain wisdom is found when we number our days. And there's a certain sense of that, knowing of our shortness and that kind of things that keep us in the right perspective with the Lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think probably for me, that's when I celebrate funerals as well. It's just very up in my kind of reflection always. It's wow, there is shortness to our lives and there is ends and things like that. It keeps me focused. So, and the people love our funeral team. They help the families a lot. It's a very stressful time for families. Any of our families who have gone through funerals with loved ones, they know that there's just so much to think about and so much to get done and so much to have there on that day that's awesome to have our teams that go there and help them.
They do seem to really appreciate it.
They do. I've always seen them. They're just oh, really? Whenever I tell them, they'll meet you 30 minutes before to tell you everything. And they're oh, really? They're just someone's going to care for us. I was just a powerful witness, I think, of care for the people and their really kind of time of need.
I found it also interesting because probably 75% of the people I'm dealing with are non-Catholic.
Yeah.
They haven't been to any church, and so this is an outreach. It's a way to touch them and tell them they're loved, and you never know what happens from that, reaching out a hand.
Absolutely. And they all come through my office before the funeral start, and to be able to to encounter them and to pray with them and to be able to bring God's love into this really kind of sad moment in their life.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about the evangelization's about. I think it's good stuff. Frank?
I've been retired for almost 6 years now.
Nice. I'm waiting for my retirement.
Just been real busy. Part of it is here at the church. I'm a sacristan for the Sunday noon Mass. And I get a lot out of that, too. It's been a blessing. I've learned a lot about all the priests here because I get to spend more time with them a little bit before and after Mass. So that's a good thing. And I've met a lot of other people too who do the Eucharistic, they're Eucharistic ministers or other sacristans. So from the service before and the one after, I've made a lot of friends that way. It's been good.
Nice. It's a very important ministry. It's usually the priest roll in 5 minutes before the Mass starts. So we're very trusting in our sacristans to have everything set up because we're okay. Only a few times have I rolled in. There's no sacristan there for some reason. And you're oh no. And you start to realize how much you appreciate them. And you're grateful that they're there. Good. Well, we're very blessed to have you at our parish and doing all that you do. Probably don't get thanked enough for that, as all of our ministers struggle with that area too. But tell us about your family and your kids. And grandkids?
We have 3 sons.
Nice.
2 of them are out of the house and quite a ways away. The oldest is married, has 2 kids, our grandsons. They live in Idaho. Our second son is up in Eureka, California, so pretty far away. He's engaged to be married this year.
Okay.
And the youngest one is left home, got laid off from his job, moved back in. Now he's got another job, and looks like he'll be moving out at the end of the year. So that's looking good again. But everybody's doing pretty well as far as their life. I mean, they're progressing in their secular life.
Sure. So all boys, huh? I've been waiting for that girl.
Well, yeah. And I thought that, well, maybe I have granddaughters. I got 2 grandsons. But I guess girls just not in the cards. So that's okay. I love my boys.
That's good. My mom is so grandchild hungry. She's like, I just want a grandbaby, you know? And like my cousins are having babies, and she's like looking at I told her, I can't give you any, I'm sorry. But, my brothers and sisters can, so you can get on top of them, But yeah, we have 3 brothers and then my little sister. So my mom finally got the girl on the 4th. Okay. And it was funny because her family's the same. She has 3 older brothers and then her. So it's very similar setting in there. So
that's pretty funny.
We'll see what the grandkids eventually come out like,
I was afraid to go for number 4 because I figured for sure being another boy,
No, right? No more boys. Yeah. Boys are their own kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
As you know. And now your sons know, right? At least one son does. That was like so. Cool. Well, we're entering this privileged season of Lent. Ash Wednesday is just this week, this Wednesday. But I think Lent is so genius in our church. I think all the seasons are genius, actually, because we're seasonal people. And we all kind of go through cycles and seasons, and they may not always lock up with how the church calendar is moving, but oftentimes we do need that little time of stopping and retreating a little bit. They call Lent the grand retreat of the year. The retreat where we all kind of go on retreat together as a church, as a community. And we enter that time of the desert with the Lord. And that's what we hear about in today's gospel, is that the Holy Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert for these 40 days of fasting, where he ate nothing, and which sounds crazy to us, right? To eat nothing for 40 days would be kind of wild. I'm not sure if I would survive that. Well, I guess I have quite a bit of reserve, so I would be kind of okay. But really going out there, and then at the end of that, hearing this really crazy passage in the gospel about his temptations. And he must have been so weak at the end of those 40 days in his humanity. And I imagine, like, as I fast, or as, me, if I fast for a day, like at the end of it, I'm kind of like, irritable and edgy and like, give me anything, right? And I can imagine 40 days of that and entering the desert and just the whole experience. But the temptations come in. These very famous temptations of the Lord. But ultimately, the temptations are always trying to distract us in our lives from the mission, I think. From the mission that God's given us to go out and make disciples of all nations, bringing his presence to others, to really help to build his kingdom, to be part of his kingdom here on earth. And I think all the distractions / temptations in today's gospel are the same. Worry about, Lord, about this earthly bread and this earthly power, and to be cared for, and feeling like he's missing all those pieces. But Jesus then responds with these higher calls, that I cannot live on bread alone, but every word that comes forth in the mouth of God, and to not put our Lord, our God, to the test, and then also to realize that his power maybe not look like the power of the world and having rule over all these different kingdoms and dimensions. Really the king of the universe, so he has to always keep his eyes on that higher goal. But in our lives too, I know in my life, temptations come at the craziest times. Usually the temptations ramp up in my life when I'm doing the mission of God, when I'm doing the will of God. That's when the temptations really ramp up in my life. And there's a purpose for that, I think. The purpose for that is that the devil here did want Jesus to continue on his ministry. This was before he started his ministry, was his time in the desert. Because he knew he was going to be freeing people from his dominion, and he was going to be building his kingdom, and he was going to be ultimately on his saving mission to the cross. At the very end of the gospel, crazy thing, it says, he departed from him for a time. because he knew he was going to come back at the end and try to hit him again right before that mission was over with, you know?
Yes.
And I think that we get hit on all sorts of different levels and different distractions and different temptations in our own lives. And yeah, sadly, some of the highest temptation in my life comes during the Eucharist, during when I'm celebrating Mass, like to get me away from that mission. Like that's why I'm a priest, is to celebrate the sacrifice, to bring Christ to people and people to Christ. And if you can distract me during those moments, there's quite a bit that can get, be drawn away from the Lord by those moments. So yeah, any thoughts on today's gospel or reflections yourself?
Well, I find it really interesting because I have found myself being so distracted through the Mass, through the Eucharist especially, and trying to bring it back in to realizing what this is and the beauty of it and the miracle of it and how special it is. And it's sometimes it gets feeling ordinary, and it's easy to let yourself get distracted. And since I've retired, I've fallen into where a laziness that I never had before, and combating this desire, just another few minutes, because I can just sleep, and it's like, for Lent, I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to 40 days of pulling it back together, of being able to actually get up and go to Mass and not let that laziness catch me. And as far as temptation, the biggest temptation I think I have faced was as my children grew, and 2 out of the 3 became agnostic and shook my faith to the core. It was like, how could I go forward? How could I go forward teaching CCD? How can I go forward with everything I do when I couldn't even teach my children? I had such tremendous guilt over their lack of faith, feeling it was something I did.
Yeah, what did we do wrong?
What did we do? And it's been the biggest hurdle, and still continues to be. Try to hang on to faith when you do feel that you're so challenged. I don't know if Frank has anything to add here. I monopolize the conversation.
I'm not none of that. I mean, I feel the same way. What did we do wrong? I mean, we tried to set good examples. We said the rosary all through Lent with the boys. They knew that we were going to do that before Lent came every year. We'd do it every year. We always made it a point to go to Mass, no matter where we were. If we were out of town, we made sure we got to Mass, that Sunday or Saturday. What did we do wrong?
I'm always, the characters during Lent like really shake me to the core always. And that the character that I cannot get over is Judas, this person who was like with Jesus in the flesh for all those years, called him by name, went and followed him, like gave his life to him and all those kind of things. And then at the end wasn't able to be taken away through that temptation, right? 30 pieces of silver for the Lord, simple earthly I just took him away so quick from everything he knew and everything he was going for, like in that moment. And for me, I'm like always like, oh, like what is that, and just, it's just like this acknowledgement in my life that like we have to acknowledge too that even I wonder if Jesus felt like that too. I know he probably never asked himself, what did I do wrong? But like he gives Judas and he gives all of us, and Peter even, and all of his disciples. They weren't even there. They all fled him in those moments where he became difficult, or when Christianity, was really taking root and really rubber meeting the road in those moments, and gave them that freedom still to respond or not, And I wonder how it pained him or even pained his mother in experiencing that. You kind of wonder. They seem to be the real spiritual examples in the life of those apostles and in their lives together. But there's all those other influences happening. The world is a strong, strong influence, a strong, strong reality. and the world and all the temptations that it presents itself with of power and pleasure and kingdoms and all of these kind of things, and also kind of this like self-preservation type of mindset, which we see all those temptations given to Jesus in today's gospel, are also all the temptations that we face all the time too. And those things look really good sometimes. They look even better than the promises of the Lord, you know? Even in my own life, sometimes I wonder that. I'm like, man, what could my life have been like if I wasn't a priest, you know? And has those temptations go through my mind? Like, what could I be doing otherwise? Or what could I be having right now? Or all these kind of things. And, but the Lord is always, thank God, he drags me back into the reality, like, no, like I called you, like, that's why you're here. You're not here because this is for you, but you're here because I put you on a mission, you know? And I think I have to remind all our parents of that too, wherever state they're in and whatever their children are at. Like the mission is ultimately the same, no matter if they're responding in that freedom or not, you know, is that mission is for us to witness to the truth, witness to the higher calls, witness to these affirmations that we know, these promises of God. But like you said, sometimes we don't even want, like, that's even hard to cling to ourselves, you know, then like we messed up or we did a fault. Jesus didn't mess up that Judas went another way, right? Or Peter denied him.
True.
It was up to their freedom and to respond. And there's a little Judas in all of us, right? You know, there's a little Peter in all of us, you know. There's a little bit more Judas probably in me than I'd like to admit, you know. Some days I'm like, oh, you know, okay, Lord. But it's about clinging, like we say, clinging to those higher promises. I love this example that Jesus gives us in today's gospel of responding to the temptations in our lives. He doesn't, sometimes the way that we respond to temptations is trying to, first of all, we try to ignore them, right? Like, you know, I don't engage the thought or whatever. And then we start to look at it, and then all of a sudden we get like obsessed with it, right? And then we try to battle the thought. I'm going to battle the temptation till I win, you know? And then all of a sudden we battle it, and guess what happens? We start to get attached to it, and then it'll start leading us down these roads of more thoughts or actions and things like this, and the kind of temptation takes us over. But Jesus kind of approaches temptation in a different way than I think we do. He acknowledges the temptation, that it's there and it's real and what it is, and then he posits a higher truth that speaks exactly to the lower truth that was given to him, the half-truth. Of course, Jesus was hungry, but then he responds with the word of God in response. Man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. Like that's the promise from the word of God that he responds with. And then he moves on. He leaves that for the Lord's word to deal with. I usually don't respond to temptation like that in my own life. I wish I did, right? I wish I was like, but I'm usually the process I said earlier of like, you know, trying to ignore it, doesn't go away, trying to engage it, then it wins, you know. And well, what could it look like if we had that kind of vocabulary in our lives of looking at the temptation and saying, like, no, I believe in the promises of God, that he gave me this mission as a parent, as he gave this mission as a priest, to go and to do these things regardless of what the kind of outcome, quote unquote, in our minds would be. I mean, if you look at the outcome of the cross in the world sense, without the resurrection, that would have been it, right? His disciples leave, all of it's over with, you know, but there's that moment of waiting before that resurrection. That's the most uncomfortable spot we are parents too, I think.
Yeah, I think that waiting is probably where we're at now.
Yeah.
Just, you know, you just put it out there and you're just waiting for the response, waiting for the turnaround, just waiting.
And it's up to us to keep that example going of going to Mass and living our faith and show them that, you know, we're not going to let what you did stop us. But we hope that you come and join us.
Yeah, this kind of, they call it proselytization by attraction, or evangelization by attraction, like calling people to the way of life that's following the gospel because of the joy it brings us, because of the peace it brings us, because of the patience and kindness and generosity and faithfulness and gentleness, self-control, the fruit of the Spirit. Like when people see that, it's what they want in their lives too, of course, you know, but they're trying to get it in different ways. Like if I just had enough of this job, then I would have it, you know? And the world can promise a lot of things, and we can seek those things for a very long time. I've been there myself, even as a priest, right? Like, well, maybe I can get it this way instead. the answer is always no, right? Like maybe for a little bit, but it definitely is like like hands in sand, you know. But I think that's the enduring kind of example of parents and grandparents, is to be able to have people say like there's a place to come back to, and this is what's available to you. I think of the prodigal son too, which we'll hear in the Lenten readings in a couple weeks. Like the father allowed the son to go away. He gave him his inheritance, and he gave him that freedom to make that decision. But the father also always had his door open. The light was always on.
Yeah.
For that son to return. And so we see even that example in the eternal Father, who has done that for us in our own lives too, you know. Gives that freedom, but always knows that we're going to return home because we were made for this, you know. That this is who we are, and hopefully that through our example and through our sharing and through our example to maybe even the grandchildren, like that can be a thing that continues to be passed forward.
That's our hope and our prayer.
Yeah, mine too. You know, even as a young priest, right? Like it's like, how many people do I talk to all the time who, you know, it's like, you know, here's the formula, guys. Here, come do it. Gotta be faithful to it. And there they go. It's okay. I'm here. You know, like whenever you're ready, here we go. You know, I'm happy to be there with you and to support you and to, you know, encourage you along the way. But sometimes it does get weary. And in those 40 days, sometimes get weary too.
Yeah,
That's true.
it is funny. You're mentioning a formula, and I think I had this false idea that, you know, you do this, you do this, you do this, and this happens. And the reality has been that's not the way it works. And having to readjust to, well, you know, how does God work? Obviously, it doesn't work the way I thought he did. And having to readjust my thinking to,
There's no guarantee.
yeah.
Yeah, I forget what Bishop Robert Barron says. This is like the God logic or the divine logic is different than the human logic. It's very different, you know, like when Jesus says things like, you know, only when you die, then you will be alive. You're like, what is that? You know, it's like, or Paul says, when I'm weak, it's when I'm strong. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like the divine logic is clearly upside down from the human logic. And so for us as Christians, it's so hard to square those things sometimes in our own hearts. I know for me, the only way I learn God's logic is by reading the scriptures, because it's so clear in there. But it's mysterious, but it's clear to me. Like the logic of the prodigal son. What kind of logic is that, right? Like, you know, the father, he didn't even ask any questions when the son came back. Like, I would be burning with questions about, like, what did you do with my money? You know, like, and that blows my mind. Like, he asked no questions. He simply put the cloak on, threw the party, and said, you're home. Like that doesn't make any logical sense to me as somebody who would want to hold someone accountable to their life, you know. It's just interesting. I mean,
or it's the type of thing where he didn't want to know. He didn't want to know.
I think
he had a pretty good idea what he did. He really want to know all the details.
Or as my mom says, she says, I don't ask questions to things I know the answer to. Like, what does that mean, Mom? Like, what do you already know? Like, okay, Mom. She's funny like that, though. So.
But I think that's an example for us too, is maybe just accept, you know, we have to accept what's been given and just take it and deal with it. You know, don't ask questions. It's there for a reason. And
yeah, I think sometimes when we fight the temptation, it can fight us back, and it can win a lot of times with a stealing of our hope, a stealing of our trust, and the stealing of our joy in our life often. But I think it's when we let God be first for us, what we're trying to be for other people, was where I really think the veracity of the Christian life comes from. Like, I have to first know what it means to be prodigal son myself before I can be prodigal father to others. Same with our parents and grandparents. You know, we first have to know what it means to be loved that radically before we can then extend that radical love to others, because we can respond with all sorts of things. And sometimes our past gets in the way too. The way we've been with our children, the way we've been with, you know, parishioners or whatever in my case, you know, or the way we've been with grandchildren, that it can kind of be obstacles and hurdles for us now in evangelization and things like that. But to know that God is ultimately the one who all these people belong to. And I've had to remind myself of that constantly as a priest. Like these aren't my people. Like these are God's people that I get to care for, you know? But as parents, like those aren't my children. In a sense, they're mine because I have been given the task to care for them. But these are God's children.
They're God's children.
They're
Yeah.
God's children, yes.
And that's a hard thing to own and to relinquish and to free them into that, to let them go into that belonging as a primary belonging, you know? And I think that there's an ultimate freedom, I think, in our hearts that comes from that, of knowing like this is God's children, and Lord, how do you want me to care for them now and where they're at in their adult lives, or where they're at in their, and to acknowledge the temptation that it is to maybe want to just give up on it and be like, well, whatever, then they're yours and I don't want it. But that's never what God does. He's a both and God, right? He's like, yes, surrender them, and then you'll have the freedom to really love them like I want you to. It's always this weird logic that God has working in our lives, you know?
Yeah.
Lent, what a season. Digs up all sorts of fun stuff inside our hearts, huh?
Good stuff, though.
I know. Sometimes I hesitate on Lent. I'm like, oh, I want to enter it, but I know if I enter it, it's going to be work, you know?
Everything good is like that, though, I have found.
Totally.
Everything that is good is work. Everything that is good takes discipline. It's like the things that come the hardest seem to be the most rewarding. And so with Lent, because it's hard, the reward afterward always feels good. Lent, as strange as it sounds, feels good. At least to me.
I know for me, like only when I engage Lent on that level, like really make sacrifices and really go deep, like does my Easter actually resurrection. It's the years that I'm kind of like, oh, well, you know, just, you know, well, I won't follow through with it, or I won't restart it or whatever. Then my Easter's kind of whatever. I never really entered the death, so I never really got the resurrection. Yeah. You know?
Very true.
That's very true.
Very true.
Hopefully this year will be deep for all of us.
Yes.
And all our families too. So
yes.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I know. We'd like to invite our families also to share a little tradition maybe they had. We shared a little earlier, maybe the Lenten rosary you had as a family, and maybe anything else you did throughout the year or during Lent that kind of helped with your family life and helped to kind of bring faith into your children's lives.
I'm going to let Frank start with this because he had a really nice reflection on when we met.
Nice.
Oh, yes. When I first got to know Maggie and her family would gather once a week, no matter Lent or not, but one night a week they would all get together for dinner, and after dinner the rosary would be said. Once the table is cleared, everybody sat down and said the rosary. I wasn't Catholic at that time. I was Lutheran, and I'm like, wow, look at this. What is this? You know? And I learned about the rosary, and it was pretty special. It was pretty special to get that and see not just her and her sisters and her brother, but their spouses too being there, and all the kids. And I thought, this is really nice. And, it'd be nice if we could do that, but our family's too scattered.
The distances are so hard these days, you know.
But we still do our rosary, and
we do.
You know, there's that. My sisters also say the rosary, so even though they're not physically with us, I know they're with us in spirit. You know, even though we're not in the same house anymore, so there's still that connection. There's that real strong devotion to the rosary. And so we still continue that through Lent. That's our big push again. Nice. To get the rosary said every day for Lent. And it's one of those love-hate relationships again. It's like, oh, I gotta say the rosary again. But once we say it, then it's like, oh, I'm so glad we did.
I feel like so much of faith within families today is like a battle to do it. But once they do it, it's like, okay, that was worth it, you know? It's like a battle to get to Mass or whatever, a battle to pray the rosary, or a battle to even sit down for dinner as a family these days, you know. But once that battle, you can get there and the battle can be done, then the victory is like, oh, wow, this was worth the battle. But sometimes the temptation is like in our face, the battle's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
the battle's not worth it. And we have to really kind of be like, no, I remember all the other battles that were won that were worth it, and that we're going to
Yeah, you
continue
have
to
to
do
battle
this.
all the time.
Yeah, the battle never stops,
No.
I wish it was a one and done thing in our lives. Like, I'm going to commit my whole life to the Lord. It's an everyday
Yeah,
thing,
wouldn't that be great if we only had to do it once?
right? One and done.
A lot of times I don't recognize the battles as what they are.
Mm.
I don't actually recognize that the feeling of everything you just described, whether it be going to Mass, whether it be saying the Rosary, whether it be getting up in the morning, all these things, I don't even recognize them as temptation.
Mm.
I don't recognize them for what they are. So it's really good to actually recognize what it is, because then it gives you, something to fight, something to, okay, I know what this is. I know not to give into it because I know this is the temptation. But sometimes I don't recognize that this is what it is. And so it's kind of good to realize that. It kind of gives you a different approach, maybe.
Identify it, bring it to the light,
Mm-hmm.
it loses its authority a little bit.
Yeah, maybe we need to reflect on that every day. Look at what distractions did I have today? What happened? What could I have done better? And then try and do better the next day.
Amen. And I think the Lord's one of my favorite scriptures that helps me through the day at the end of the night when I realize, man, I fell for that one again, is that God's patience is directed toward our salvation. I cling to that one a lot, especially when I'm struggling,
Yeah,
God is being patient.
Isn't it wonderful that he's got that patience? I mean, he doesn't have the patience like I do, or, thank goodness.
Oh, he hasn't cut me off yet. So. Because he wants to save us, and And is that last line from the second reading today, which I think is like the key. I've been finding a lot of keys recently. I get too many keys in my pocket. But the key for this gospel is, cry out to the Lord and he will save you. Like, cry out in the name of the Lord and he will save you. Like, it's to identify our need for him, and there are these moments that we don't really identify, and then to be able to cry out and to really allow his closeness to come to us. Awesome. Well, we thank you for taking the time out today and coming and sharing with us and being vulnerable and honest, because so many of our families are in the same place or will be, and to know that we're not alone in that, I think is so important. And to know you're not alone in that. So many other families I talk to are struggling in the same place about their children and grandchildren. And I think that we just have to be able to trust that the Lord is there with us, but also to band together and to be of a support to each other,
Mm-hmm.
The sad part is feeling like being alone in the midst of that. Or, I feel like I don't want to share this because I feel like this is a defeat for my point, but it's like we're so together in all of it. All of us have slightly different aspects, but we're together in the reality that the Lord is faithful, that Easter does come around the corner after we wait, that period of waiting, and to really enter that with deep faith, to renew our faith this Lent. So thanks for coming on to Home, where faith and family meet. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
you.